choose whether they want to drink. They're able to choose whether they want to smoke. Yes, some things are not that good. However, they are able to make this choice. Now, why does the government trust these 18-year-olds? Well, the reason is because they are able to make these decisions. They got to the age where their minds are able to think about all sides, both sides, and to think rationally whether they want to do this. They are going to colleges, to universities, and they are able to do what they want to study for the rest of their lives. They are able to think what they want to do with their lives. Now, if we trust these 18-year-olds with all of these things, and these things are not easy things, now, why can't we trust them with the fact of what should they do with their own body, their own property, everything that they are? So, in our case, we're going to first of all show you what is not effective in the status quo. We will show you that the non-justified way of the things work nowadays, and the second speaker is going to talk about the unfairness and the discrimination in the way of the status quo. Now, when we talk about this notion, we define this as in colleges and universities, where people over the age of 18 are going to study in, they will have the option to choose whether they want to have a physical education class or whether they do not. Now, we define physical education as theoretical but has connection personally to them, like things about diet, about your body and things like this, and the practical issue. No, thank you. The practical issue, which will be like sports teams, like running lessons, things this type. Now we recognize few problems with the status quo. First of all, that it is not effective. Second of all, that this is an unjustified take and right. And third of all, that it promotes wrong things over the values that we would like to promote as the government. Yes.
What is the proposition suggesting that is different from the status quo?
The proposition will suggest that, basically, instead of forcing you to go to some sports lessons and making the fact that if you will get your diploma or not count on the fact that if you pass these lessons or not, instead you will be able to choose these lessons. You will be able to choose whether you want to take care of your body now or in any other part of your life. You will be able to do everything that you want with your body nowadays. So, let's begin. Let's look about the effectiveness of the status quo. Now, what the proposition recognizes as the things that you must have to be healthy is things such as diet, the knowledge about things like actual action, like running, performing sports, and doing these things. But the most important thing the team proposition recognizes as what they need to be able to perform some kind of physical action is to have motivation. Without motivation, no one will not do anything. Now, why is motivation the most important? Because if I am not motivated, for example, to do a certain thing, there is no reason that I will do these things. And even if someone will force me to do these things, and it's not only that I won't be motivated to do them, I will be unmotivated. I won't want to do them because someone forces me to do these things. Now, we recognize two types of the status quo, that of students who are in universities and colleges. Now, first of all, there are people who are already used to physical action, people who really love it, who like it, who all their lives were in sports clubs and are able to do these things. But from the other hand, we recognize the group of people that come to universities to study, to further explore things about their minds, not to do physical action. People who are not motivated to do this, who are not maybe capable of doing this, people who just don't want to perform any kind of physical action. Now, when we look about the already motivated people, so no matter what we do, even if we will make this, even if our plan will work and we will make it optional, choose whether you want or not. So people who are already motivated, people who already want to do these things, so they will go and will choose these courses. They will be able to continue performing physical action, and they will enjoy it. No thank you. Now, but what about the unmotivated people, people who do not want to do these kinds? So, few things. The fact that they now don't want to do this doesn't make, first of all, the fact that they don't want to do this specifically, and this time specifically during their studies in the universities, doesn't make it something that will rest during their whole lives. Doesn't make it something that they won't do outside of the university. Doesn't make it something that they won't want to do in any case. Now, if they will be forced to do this, it will create some kind of anti-motivation. It's not that they won't want to do this, but it's also the fact that they will so hate it and will feel so angry about it, and no thank you, and will be so unmotivated that it might in a way like cause them a certain trauma. Yeah, not in all cases, but in some cases it might cause them trauma not to practice their whole lives, and in some cases they will practice it later when they want. Now, if we talk about cases of obese people, people who are who suffer from overweight. Now, we believe that these schools are not placed to take care of these people. First of all, these schools are not capable of everything. They're not capable. The second speaker will talk furthermore about this. But these schools are not capable of doing these things. They're capable of doing like regular things, but not these. So this is not the place, and this is not the environment to help these people. Now I'd like to move to the second point, which is justification. Now, when as the government, we take certain freedoms, like we do nowadays. When people harm themselves, when people make irrational choices, and when people harm the society. Now, as for the harm of the society, the fact that, for example, I am not doing any type of physical action, it doesn't mean that I'm fat, that I'm not healthy. It just means that I don't do physical action. It doesn't harm anyone else, but maybe a little bit me. But as I've already told you, it doesn't, just a second, it doesn't harm me for the rest of my life. Yes.
If optional physical education has so much benefits, why should it be only for students over the age of 18?
Okay, because we believe that students under the age of 18 are not capable of making this rational choice, are not capable of thinking correctly. This is why we force students until the age of 18 to go to schools. This is why we take care of them. We believe that their minds are not developed enough to make this rational decision. Now, these students, by not performing sports, they do not necessarily harm themselves. Why is that? Because the fact that I'm, again, as I already said, the fact that I'm not performing this kind of sports, specifically at this time during college or university, does not mean that I won't perform it in the future. Does not mean that I won't perform it in any other place outside of university. And why is it a rational choice to choose not to perform these kinds of sports? First of all, when you're over 18, again, you get all these things you get to decide on. Your mind is developed enough to know what you want to do for the rest of your life. You are capable of making all these choices, and the government trusts you to make all these choices. And we believe that under the same logic, we should trust you to choose whether you want to perform these kinds of things or whether you do not. In addition, you know yourself the best. You know whether you are good at sports. You know whether you are humiliated of performing sports in front of other people. You know all these things about yourself, and this is why we believe that you should have the choice whether to perform these kinds of sports or not. So in my speech, I showed you exactly why the status quo is not good and why exactly we should change. Thank you, and I give you the floor.
Thank you, and I'll hear from the first member of the office.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Madam Speakers, before moving on to our team split or our team case, I'll have to first make refutations against team population's first two arguments and then present our team case of Team Korea today. The first argument was about motivation, how there's so many wonderful benefits of motivation, how people are motivated more when things are optional, especially when it's physical education. And it's exactly the reason why we agree that people do perform better when they're motivated. When they are not motivated, they do not perform better, and they should have a choice to do so. And that's exactly the reason why we want to probably oppose the motion and say that it should be optional because of these benefits for people, also for people under the age of 18 from the start of elementary school. That's the steps that we want to take in team population today, and see that because we recognize all these benefits of physical education being optional, we want to make it make physical education optional for students from the start of elementary school, from the start of mandatory education. And with that in mind, I have to move on to the refutation against the second argument of justification. Let's say they told us that they think that it should be over the age of 18. Well, thank you, ma'am, because they think that citizens are not responsible. Students are not responsible before the age of 18. Ladies and gentlemen, the only rights that these citizens under the age of 18 are restricted of in the status quo are rights such as the right to smoke or the right to alcohol, etc., which is 100% detrimental for these citizens themselves, ladies and gentlemen. That's the reason why the government restricts certain rights of these students, ladies and gentlemen. However, the rest of those rights that are not that much of a detrimental effect on these people, on these citizens. So, for example, physical education, that does not have such a detrimental effect, is something that should be decided upon by the parents with responsibility, that should be cared upon by the parents, not something that the government should go on and decide and interfere with the parents' responsibility upon their own children, ladies and gentlemen, of these young students. That's the reason why the government should stop becoming such of a big brother and saying that they should control all these students' rights and make it mandatory, etc. Let's say it should be optional, but it won't from the start of mandatory education because of all the benefits that has been conceded by T proposition. Yes, ma'am.
So under the logic, you agree to the fact that kids in elementary school should be able to vote and be driven to by their parents?
No. Of course, because of those things have detrimental effects. If the students, they have the right to vote, they can have the detrimental effects on the nation itself. Those kind of detrimental effects I've already explained as something that should be interfered by the government because of those detrimental effects. However, in the case of physical education, when you have already proved that physical education is something that's positive, we don't see any reason why the government should interfere with these cases when it's actually something positive and not something detrimental to society or the individuals themselves. And I'd like to clarify some point in team opposition today before moving on to a team case. Let's say instead of making it mandatory for or optional for the age of 18, let's say it should be mandatory optional from the age of the start of mandatory education. Let's just say that, for example, as the status quo is implementing policies such as physical checkups every semester or every year for these children, so that they can know if their health is good or bad, and the parents can know if if the children's health is good or bad, if they need mandatory physical education or not, so that these students and parents can decide upon whether they want to take physical education, whether they don't want to take physical education. We think this can be a very good way to make physical education be for the betterment of these students themselves, and not make it mandatory from the start of primary education. And we have three arguments to propose today in team opposition's case. Firstly, about the effects of optional physical education from an early age. Secondly, about the freedom of choice that these students have. And lastly, about parental responsibility and how the government should not become a big brother. And the first and second arguments will be explained by myself, and the third argument will be elaborated on by our deputy leader of opposition. Now, to move on to our first argument of the effects of optional physical education, I'll have to divide this into two parts. First part being the problems and the backlashes of the status quo of mandatory physical education, and secondly being the effects of optional physical education from an early age. Now, for this status quo's backlashes. In the status quo, we have to say status quo is not a utopia. Ladies and gentlemen, mandatory physical education is not as wonderful as projected by some people, ladies and gentlemen, because of its backlashes. And the backlashes is as follows. It's that those people, those students, certain students who are not so good at physical education, or who are not so much talented as others, are separated from those who are talented. For example, there's a word called jock in the dictionary that used to be slang that describes those students who are good at sports, and those students are often portrayed as people who are good at sports and popular, and those who are considered as quote-unquote cool. And those who are bad at sports are often people who are left out, students who are left out and become outcasts in the society of the school and the members of the school. Let's say those are all the backlashes of physical education becoming mandatory. The backlashes of physical education being mandatory at such an early age, ladies and gentlemen. That's the reason why those people who are discriminated against further on, discriminated against because of physical education, hate physical education even more later on in their lives. They discontinue with the physical education as long as the mandatory education minimum is ended, because they feel that because of this mandatory physical education, they have become victims of this mandatory physical education. Yes, no.
Kids at the age of 8 also do not like math, also do not like other
subjects. The difference between those subjects and mandatory physical education is that those subjects are required in the society for certain things, such as if you want to go, even if you want to go after the age of 18, if you want to have education in universities, you need those academic subjects. However, if you have physical education, if it's not mandatory, then those who want to go to universities using physical education can always take the courses, but those who do not want it do not have to listen to physical education. And the effects of optional physical education, the second part of the first argument, is that because students already know about and have been participating in sports way before elementary education. They know whether they want or they do not want to take physical education. And the people who like physical education will take the classes even if it's optional. So it will have a higher quality of physical education for those who want it. And also, people who do not want to take physical education, who are victims of this method of physical education, will have to take other courses that benefit them better and benefit them. So as to say, it's beneficial for both stakeholders, those who like physical education and those who do not like it. For the second argument of the freedom of choice, let's just say there are certain inalienable rights of the citizens, for example, freedom of choice. And it's guaranteed unless it has detrimental harms, as I explained before. For example, freedom of choice is not guaranteed for smoking for teenagers because it has detrimental harms to them. And the difference is that the difference between physical education and not having physical education is that it's not as significant as suggested by the government side, but actually not having physical education can have much more harms, like having physical education can have much more harms, like the backlash as I've explained before. And the students should have the freedom of choice to choose whether or not they want to take physical education, because if they feel like they're going to get hurt because of physical education, or they're going to become outcast, or somehow it's going to be not beneficial for their education, then they should be able to choose to do other subjects that may benefit them even more later on in the society. So there should be freedom guaranteed by the government when it does not have detrimental effects on either the students or the other students. We have to say, the freedom, why should the government interfere with the rights of these students when it does not have harms upon the students themselves or the students or the other students who can also take optional physical education? Let's just say, if they get physical education optional from an early age, we can be sure that these students will be able to do something that can be beneficial for their own lives, be able to choose what's beneficial for their own lives, and therefore that they're ready to oppose and not make physical education only be optional for the age of over 18. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, what the opposition team is telling you today is that we should do this. We should educate physical education from the age of 8. But what they have forgot is why we specifically have schools for the children who are under the age of 18. We have those schools in order to teach them. Why is that? Because at the beginning they are irrational. They don't know what they want to be in their lives. They still are new to this world. We don't know if how much they will need math in the future. We don't know how much they will need sport in the future. They basically are new to this world and can't know everything. And what they are telling you is that we should do this optional. And once we will do this optional, if they want, they'll go, and if they want, they don't. But you need to remember, those children are not rational right now. They are new to this world. This is specifically what's happening in this case.
What, sir?
Yes.
Well, yes, in some cases, children may not be able to make the right decisions. That's exactly the reason why parents actually exist. It's not the government's duty to come in and intervene with the children's decision and the parents' decisions.
Well, we know that the parents' decision is important, but we're talking about the fact that children go to school and their parents have to go to work and they can teach also. This is why we have schools. This is why the country supply you all the education of physical, of math, of English. In order to teach you those stuff, and you don't know yet if you need it or not, since you don't know still how the world works, how much you'll need maybe in the future. You don't know on what you're going to go, and when you're going into school, you know that when you go to school, you basically gain all this stuff, all these options, and then when you go to the university, that's when you're over the age of 18, you know what you want to do right now. You already learned a lot of stuff. You know what subjects do you want to take in your in the future. If you want to study maybe physics or maybe even sport, but what we are trying to do is just telling you that we should start it from the age of 8. But this is not the case today. Today the case is if it's good or not to have this as optional is it good or not to have this as an optional at the age of 18 to go to the university and have physical education. And this is what basically I'm telling you, that we should have physical education as optional at the university from the age of 18 and not when you're young at school and you don't know yet what you actually want to do, what is actually good or not. And that's why they're irrational at this time. Now, so basically what the opposition team is... Yes.
One little difference between subjects such as math and PE is that if you can't do plus and minuses, you can't really survive in society afterwards. However, just because you can't really play soccer well doesn't mean that you can survive in society.
Well, math and English are important to surviving in the society, but also sport can help you to survive in the society, since maybe you will learn how to stay healthy, but that still gives you all the opportunities that you may need in the future. It still open you all the pages, all the doors of what you may need, and once you're over the age 18, once you're becoming a rational person, this is the moment when you already understand what you actually want to do in your life. So this is why we're basically doing so. Now I'd like to move on to my point, which is unfair discrimination. So basically, let's say unfair discrimination. Let's say that the situation of today is that in university you have to take a course in sport. And basically there are two kinds of people. You have those who are born like a Superman. They can do many stuff that you can't imagine, how fast we can run, how fast we can lift things and all this stuff. On the other hand, you have people who weren't born Superman, unfortunately. You know, you can be always the stronger one, and you're not always capable of being so strong. So basically, once you have this as a must, but you have to pass the course, so the coach has to teach you in a specific way in order to pass this course. But you can't, if you don't have a strong body just like the other, then you can't promise that you will actually succeed. And basically, you're lowering the options of other people who have less stronger body than the other. Yes.
Do you really believe that just because you suddenly turn 18, you all of a sudden have all your dreams set suddenly, and you can suddenly make rational decisions for yourself? Do you really believe that just because you turn 18, all that's going to happen?
Well, when you're only 12 years old, you are basically just like, once again, when you're 12 years old, you just came from your home, you're now going to meet new friends, you don't know all of this stuff, you don't know basically all of the math, all of the English, and how you're going to go and use sport in your life, you don't know yet all this stuff. But in school, this is the place where it's the key for your life, maybe, and basically you understand all the stuff that you need in school. They're giving you all the basic information about every and every stuff. But once you turn already of the age of 18, once you're finishing school, you already have all this basic knowledge in order to understand where they want to, in which line they want your life to go. If you want to become a great math teacher, if you want to be an excellent physicist in the USA, you can't know what you want to be when you're under the age of 18. So basically, you don't know. Maybe if you say, okay, let's do it optional. Let's not even study math as a must. If I want, I will study. Then when you turn at the age of 18, you understand how important it was. You understand that you missed your opportunity to succeed in the university, since in the university you need to already know math, you need to already know English, and also sport, because once you already studied sport, you already know all this stuff, how to make your body healthier. But once you already turn of the age of 18, you already know the basic stuff that you basically need, maybe to run outside in order to become healthier. And if you want, this is why this is an optional decision and not a must, you can go to the sport teams in the university and to do all these stuff that you want. So basically what I've told you today. We've showed you that we should do these sport lessons, physical education only from the age of 18, since this is the moment when you become a rational person. This is the moment when you understand what you want and you have all the basic information in order to do this decision. Unlike when you're 8 years old and older, you basically know is to take your own bag and maybe eat and drink. And this is, and I beg you to speak with this.
There's a brief period until like the
I think if most children would think it's 15 seconds. I think if this that we're not supposed to mark down until after someone goes beyond 8. But it's an 8-minute speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had a proposition team that told us that because children under 18 cannot make rational choices, we should force these children to take physical education. And we think there was a problem in this case because they didn't prove to us why just because children under 18 can make rational choices, the government has to force these children to have and take physical education. We think that just because a person might make irrational choices doesn't lead to a conclusion that the government has to be the one to interfere and force these things upon people. We think that in a democracy where we respect freedom, the idea that we have gotten no answer from the proposition, even though people can make irrational choices, unless those choices have so much harms like smoking or drinking alcohol or like driving cars, which we believe are so detrimental to the children. We think that unless we're not talking about those cases, then we should respect the freedom of these children. Now, looking at more closely to their arguments before going on to our last substantive case about parents' responsibility, we think that, firstly, even though children may be irrational, we think this is exactly why we have parents. And we think that because there are parents, we think the government should not be carrying every single thing for the children, which is going to be more elaborated in my last argument. And secondly, as I stated, we think that because physical education, not doing physical education and making an option does not really greatly harm the students. We think that taking physical education for 1 or 2 hours a week isn't really going to harm these children greatly. We think that even though it is the case that these children make irrational choices, the government should respect these choices made by the children. Yes, ma'am.
You respect irrational choices? If someone kills you, will you respect his choice to kill someone?
And we're not talking about an irrational choice of killing somebody. We don't think that just because you don't take physical education, it's going to have the same effect as the irrational choice of killing somebody. We think that Team Proposition has never clarified the importance of physical education in our society. We think that even though we have physical education, because the amount of physical education is too less, and we think that a lot of children who don't really want to take physical education in the first place don't really participate actively, which were explained by our first speaker. We think that the effects are really small and are only limited to some children who really participate actively. And for those children who really participate actively and benefit a lot from physical education, we think that these children will still have the option and will still have the benefits that are guaranteed by our model of making this optional. And we'd like to ask Team Proposition to prove to us why this irrational choice it has to be feared so much that we have to restrict the freedoms of our children. We think that children can always make irrational choices like playing a lot of computer games or drinking or eating too much fast food, which are harmful. But we still let them do this because children also need freedom to do what they want. And we think that this idea of freedom was well explained by our first speaker. Now, also this point about how this should also apply for math, science, and other things was brought up by the proposition. We think that other subjects like math, science, and math, science, or English. We think that these subjects are mandatory. Some things that a person and a child needs when he goes to university, which we believe is crucial for that person's rest of the life. Yes, sir.
In an elementary school, you study all the basic things, all the subjects in a basic level. Why does sports, the gym, not in that list?
Because we think that unlike other subjects like math and science, these physical education is not something that you need in a society. We think we've already raised that in the QI, and the answer we got from the proposition is that physical education and playing sports and playing basketball and playing soccer can help you in the society. But we were asking. Well, our point was that math and science, for these subjects are mandatory for you to go to college and therefore find a good job. But for physical education, we don't think the importance is not as great as these subjects. That's why we think if there isn't such a great need for these people, for these children to adapt in the society, why should the government force physical education to children who don't really want to take these classes? And also going on to the assumption that the proposition has made. They told us how when children enter the age of 18, now they can have rational choices and now they are allowed to choose for themselves. So thank you, sir. We think that this assumption, even though there is a general idea that when they become adults, you can choose for themselves, we think that this assumption was never proved. They've never explained to us why children, even just because they turn over the age of 18, how somehow these children will be suddenly choose for themselves just because they have taken classes for college, for high school, or middle school. So thank you. And also let's tell you that we have never had an answer from team proposition about the importance of freedom or the backlashes of these policies. We told you how children will be put at a greater difficulties when they are put through mandatory education, because many of these children don't really want to take these classes, but when you put them, they'll actually learn nothing, but they'll only be shameful, and they'll only get a lot of dirty comments from other friends. And now let's go on to the last argument from our case, which is the parents' responsibility. We think that when it comes to children, a better entity to care for these children is not the government, but the parents themselves. Because we think that the parents are the legal guardians of these children, and they are the ones who care for them the most and who love them the most. And this is why we don't gather all the children and put them in a governmental organization or governmental service center and make every food and make every activities that we think are the best for these children, because the parents are there to guide and to actually nurture for these children. No, thank you. And we think that if we are letting these parents control and restrict and somehow limit these children from doing harmful things like playing computer games or their diets, then why should we exempt physical education and their health from these parents? We think that other responsibilities that these parents have are not really different from the responsibility of keeping these children healthy. We think that parents really have the responsibility and do have the responsibility of keeping their children healthy. And we don't think why the government has to intervene and by restricting rights. We don't think why the government has to restrict these children's rights when the parents are there for them. And we think that the difference between parents and children is that when the government intervenes, then it becomes mandatory, and therefore there is no freedom whatsoever for the children. But in the case of parents, although there is this outer pressure that these children have to somehow exercise, children can still talk to their parents about how they're going to exercise, or children can at least express their opinions. In the case of government force and government intervention, this is not going to be possible. So this is why we think in most cases, when we're not talking about things like drugs or alcohol, parents should be the ones to talk to the children, because parents are the ones who know them the best, and also children are the ones who know them the best. And that's why there can be the best decisions made between parents and children. And like lastly mentioned, that when the government starts taking away our rights, just because the government thinks that there are potential harms, and we think that we are not going to have a humane life in which we enjoy our life, because we need freedoms in our lives to enjoy our lives. Without that, we won't feel freedom. Thank you.
gentlemen, let's go into the mind of an 8-year-old. What does he see as rational? What does he think is better? The thing that has more sprinkles and the thing that is more colorful and is more fun, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we do not let them choose. That is why we do not let them elect candidates for the. We do not let them elect because they will choose the candidate which has more sprinkles. We do not let them smoke because they do not know what's best for them. And we do not let them choose what to do with their bodies, physical education, because they will not choose the right decision. They will not see both sides. They just go for what's more fun, what's more colorful, and not what's right, not what's good for them. They do not know right from wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have 3 main areas of clash. The first is, The first is when do we take the freedom of choice? The criteria. The second is can minors choose? And the third is sports as important as other subjects, math, physics, so on. And the fourth is parents versus government. No, thank you. Let's begin. The first area of clash is when do we take the freedom of choice? We give you 3 criteria. And the one which is most disputed about is the decision a rational decision? Excuse me. We believe that if the decision which is made is not rational, is not considered, is not understood fully, it is not allowed. Just like we don't allow drugs because drugs intoxicate you and make you not see right from wrong, we do not allow little kids to choose because they don't know right from wrong. They don't know what's best for them. They just go for what has more sprinkles, not for what's good, not for what's right. No, thank you. So basically, our criteria, which is very, very important in every government, is the rational decision, which we believe is not being fulfilled here. Yes, please.
Why do you assume that parents are non-existent?
Because the parents are not the right people to choose for them, as I will say in our fourth area of clash. The government is, because the government knows best. So basically, we believe that the decision should and needs to be rational for it to be free, for us to have the freedom of choice. If the decision is not rational, we can take the freedom of choice, just like we do not allow drugs because they are not rational. They make you fuzzy and you don't understand right from wrong. So that's that. The second area of clash is can minors choose? And to that we say no, completely no. The minors do not have a clear understanding. As I said, they're rational, their rationality is sprinkles and fun. No, thank you. They believe that whatever is more fun, whatever is more sprinkly is better. They do not know what's best for them. No, thank you. They will just go for whatever they want, whatever their friends say, whatever peer pressure tells them to do. They do not understand this thing. They are not thinking rationally, and they don't understand the consequences of what they're doing. We cannot allow them to do them. So, just a second. Just like we don't allow them to vote, just like we don't allow them to drink alcohol, we shouldn't allow them to do this because there's no difference. If they do not think rationally, they do not know what they're doing, so they should not do it.
So, well, smoking, when choosing not to smoke is a good decision, is choosing to do PE or not do PE, which is the right decision, suggested by your friend? Why do you look at it in black and white terms?
Can you rephrase that?
Why do you assume that choosing PE or not choosing PE has to be right or wrong?
No, we do not believe that choosing PE or not choosing it has to be right from wrong. We just think that children do not know what's best for them. They do not think clearly, and they do not know what's good for them. And basically, we believe that this decision, forcing them to do this thing is better because they are not rational. Understand what I have? All right. The third area of clash is sports as important as math, physics, science, whatever? And we believe, yes, it clearly is. In elementary schools, you need to learn the basics of everything. Just like you learn the basics of English, just like you learn the basics of math, physics, chemistry, whatever. Sports is included in that list. Why is that? Because sports is important as math. You need to be healthy to be a part of our society. You need to know how to take care of yourself to be a part of our society, how to eat properly, how to drink properly, how to exercise, how to live. So basically, sports is clearly as important, is maybe even more important because it clearly affects your body, your health and everything. So it's as important of a subject as math, as science, as whatever, and it should be taught to elementary schools, and that is why we think so. The fourth area of clash is who should be the one choosing, the government or the parents, and we believe that the government should be choosing. And why? Because the government is more, it's smarter, it knows best. It knows that physical education for the kids is a better thing because they don't know what's good for them, so the government has to choose. They know that physical education is a good thing. They know that physical education will help them grow. It's as important of a subject as anything else. They know it's clearly a main thing, and they know better than the parents who are not the right people to choose for their children.
Contradiction, because just before in your speech you said that you don't know which choosing PE or not choosing PE is good or bad, but you said that choosing PE is a good thing.
No, we believe that choosing PE while you're still young and while you still don't know what's good for you is the best option, not while you're an adult and not in general.
One, sir.
Thank you. So let me conclude what I just said. I present to you our 4 areas of clash, which we believe the first and second, when we say the freedom of choice and the rational decision for the minor, are the main ones, and we clearly won on them because we need to consider rationality in our mechanism, and children are not rational, not until they turn 18 and not until they see the world the way it is. So our 4 areas of clash were when we take the freedom of choice, can minors choose, and the sport as important as math, and the last one was parents versus government. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's hear from the third member of office.
Ladies and gentlemen, the most honorable adjudicators, in today's society, why do we let children age of 8 and age of 12 play computer games? Well, under Team Proposition's logic, they should not be able to play computer games because maybe it can drop their eyesight or whatsoever. However, the reason why the government of any democratic nation guarantees the right of these children to play computer games is because they respect the children's choice to play what they want to, and actually, if they take pleasure in playing computer games, and if they actually feel that they're benefiting from the computer games because they actually feel better or something like that, the government is trying to respect the individual's rights, even though they're children, because the government does not see any detrimental harms coming from computer games, unlike smoking or taking drugs or drinking alcohol, etc. And we say that it's exactly the same thing for the choice of whether to take physical education or not. We say that there's no detrimental harms coming from we say that there's no detrimental harms at all coming from not taking PE classes, and in such cases we say the government has to respect the freedom of choice of these individuals and also the parental decision too. So, having said that, now let's move on and provide you with the 3 major clashes that we could find on Team Opposition. Well, the first clash we found was, why do we need optional PE? And second clash that we found was, when are we going to start making it optional? And third clash we found was, who has the responsibility? Is it the government or is it the individuals and the parents? Well, to move on to our first clash, which is about why do we need optional physical education? Well, let me quote what Team Proposition's first speaker had told us in today's debate. They told us people can be ashamed by participating in PE classes. And also they told us that without motivation, PE classes can be absolutely inefficient. Well, these were quoted directly from PM's speech. Well, we say on Team Opposition that the primary speech that we heard in today's debate is perfectly the reason why optional PEs are the best, and actually mandatory physical education is absolutely inefficient and unnecessary. I'll have to divide this question into 2 points. Well, the first first point will be about how people, how these students at such a young age can actually become social outcasts due to lack of interest or due to lack of physical ability. Well, we believe that students who are good at physical education, that there definitely are students who are good at soccer and who are not good at soccer, and people who are good at basketball and who are good at basketball. And we see many students in reality that become social outcasts because they cannot really actively participate in physical education, education classes. And we say that this can be humiliating for students, and this can be traumatic for students, and this can actually drive them permanently away from physical education and physical activity itself, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker. And why do people over 18 have the right not to get humiliated, while the younger people actually do not have the right to move themselves away from humiliation, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker? We say that this is unfair, and we say that it's rather the government's duty to protect the younger people when they're, and we say that it's under Team Populations Logic, we say that we cannot really protect these young people from getting these traumatic experiences. We say that this is unjustifiable. Yes, ma'am.
You are preventing these children from being exposed to things in the world. They will be humiliated. They will have to deal with these things. They should learn how to do this in young ages.
Well, we like to answer. We like to ask one simple question. In what way does, let's say, Hillary Clinton get humiliated because she can't play soccer? We say that these people who do not have a lot of talent in physical education can grow up to become politicians and other experts in other fields that do not need any kind of physical education itself. Well, we say that for people like this, we say that physical education is unnecessary, and we've already explained to you, Mr. Speaker and Madam Speaker, how physical education differs from other critical subjects like math, science, because without math and science taught in the primary education system, we say that these people cannot survive in society. They cannot even calculate. How can they possibly do anything? They cannot count. If they can't do 1 + 1, what can they do in a society, Madam Speaker and Mr. Speaker? So our second point of this class is that there's a lack of motivation, and therefore it's going to be inactive. We say that if there's inactive participation, it's actually not only an inefficient time management for these individuals that actually are not participating in the PE classes, but it's actually also harmful to the students who really want to actively participate in the physical education system itself. Because we say that we say that if there are people who are lagging behind and who are basically refusing to participate because they lack physical ability, then it's basically going to take away time, precious time, from people who are actually willing to actively engage in the physical education class. And we say that this is actually a very inefficient usage of time for both sides, for people who want to actively engage and people who do not really want to actively participate. So this leads on to our second class. When are we going to actually make it optional? Well, we have two major points. So first of all, we have to talk about the fundamentals of democracy. Well, we believe that individuals, the ground in which democracy stands upon is actually quite simple. It's basically that individuals can basically choose for themselves, and they know best what they want to do. It's not the government, but it's actually individuals. So basically, we believe that individuals, especially, they're worried about like the elementary school kids, like age of 8, age of 9. Well, we say that for these people, for these students, there are parents. There are parents who actually exist to actually help them out. And we say that this is actually one of the reasons why we're actually trying to make it optional from the very beginning of primary education at basically elementary school. And we believe that, secondly, we believe that by making it optional from a very early age, we believe that students who really take interest in other subjects can have more time in participating in those other subjects instead of wasting their time trying to do something that they really do not want to do. And we believe that for students who want to take PE classes, this is also beneficial because they can have efficient classes, efficient physical education classes from such an early age. So our last class, yes, sir.
Imagine what happens if you didn't go to any physical education, and then when you're 20 years old or 30, you just lost and you didn't actually physically do any exercises, and then you're not 17 in it, but it's too late because you didn't even get
well, we don't really see what they're trying to claim from their PY, but we say that just because you don't take PE classes in the primary education or the primary education or like high school education, we believe that that does not exactly mean that the people will actually refuse to do any kind of physical activities in the future. We believe that there are chances open in the society which can actually start doing other physical activities even though they do not take PE classes. And we say that just by making PE classes mandatory is only going to drive them away from any further physical activities in the society. So we believe that it actually, our policy that we suggested on Team Opposition actually has a better chance of people participating in the society. So our third question is, who has a responsibility? Well, they told us that governments know best. Well, we say that the individuals know best, and the parents are the people who know the second best, and the government are people who know nothing. But we believe that parents are the people who are the most loving for these children, who watch them 24/7. We believe that the parents know the best. It's not the government. How can the government, who are doing other things, who are busy making FTA agreements, know about these people's for all these families? We believe that this is absolutely illogical argument coming from Team Proposition today. Please vote for opposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and now here the opposition reply.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Madam Speakers, in this debate there were two key questions that the both teams have to answer. Firstly, about the age problem of age 18. Should we have optional physical education under the age of 18, but from the start mandatory education over the age of 18? Second question was, whose responsibility is it to protect these children? Is it the government's or is it the parents? Well, I'll give you the logic and reasoning behind the reason why we thought that both key questions were answered better by Team Opposition today. Well, to the first question of the age of 18. Team Population kept saying one thing, that before the age of 18, students are completely irrational. First, you have to say that's exactly the reason why parents exist, which Team Population apparently ignored, saying that the governments know much better, and they ignored our question of why shouldn't the parents be more responsible, which we answered in the second key question. Not to say that parents know well and they make the rational decisions because they're the adults, and according to Team Populations, over the age of 18, people can make rational decisions. Not to say the parents are definitely over the age of 18, so they can make rational decisions on behalf of their children. And second, we have to say that the children do have the right to choose in their case, because they're the stakeholders in this case. They're the people that get directly benefited or harmed from these physical educations, because they have a detrimental effect on their health, or if they can have detrimental effects on their social relationship with their friends. They're the ones who should be able to choose, because it's not the government that gets the benefits or gets the harms. It's the children, the students themselves, that gets the benefits or harms. They should be one of the people who gets to choose and who has the right to choice upon this matter. When you have mandatory education, I want to say that the mandatory physical education is very ineffective in today's society, because when you have mandatory physical education in the status quo, obesity keeps on increasing in the United States. And I'm going to say why? Because mandatory physical education proved itself not to be as effective as it used to be, and it doesn't deserve much credit, and that's the reason why we found that we need to change the status quo, which is the reason why Team Opposition tried to change the status quo, making it optional physical education and making it more of a parent's responsibility. But what the Proposition side is doing today, ladies and gentlemen, is they're suggesting the status quo. We don't see any change of the status quo from their side, because actually in the world, to say almost every university makes it optional for all the classes, which includes the physical education, which is the reason why we don't see any change in the status quo when there is a problem in the status quo of Team Population. Which is the reason why we believe that we have answered the key question better of why it should be under the age of 18 who should be deciding upon what to do and what not to do, because it is them who are the stakeholders in society. And second, I have to talk about the second key question, which is about the government versus the parent, which should be an entity which has a responsibility. Not to say the government, naturally, because the government is a big organization, generalizes the children into one group and makes their education, because they can't attend to every child. Well, as a nature of parents, they have only 1 or 2 children, or at the most 3 or 4, I guess. But the parents are the ones who know their children best, because it's a private matter. It's not a generalization matter. That's the reason why they know best about their children, which is the reason why we disprove Team Population's argument that the government knows best about the children. And also, because we see in the case of status quo, when things are not detrimentally harmful like alcohol and smoking, and when it does not harm other people like voting, the parents get the responsibility from the government to control their children. For example, computer games that are restricted by the parents, the government allows the basic rights to freedom of choice to the children, and the children's health or something concerned by the parents, so the parents hold responsibility and restrict these children from playing excessive amount of computer games, which is the reason why parents hold the responsibility and they are responsible in making the choices. In these many cases, I have to say, we have also answered the second key question better, why it should be the parents' responsibility to take control of the children's matter and not the government side, and that's what we beg to oppose. Thank you very much.
Proposition of 5.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this debate, Steve Proposition came up with two main areas of passion. In our opinion, we should answer to win this debate. Now, first of all, there's the government's job, and second of all, there's the role of schools, of universities versus primary schools. So let's begin. When we talk about the government's job, Team Opposition came out with the fact that the government has to be very far away from its citizens, which means that the government has to take very little care of little children, of groups that it has to take care of them because of things I will show you. Now, they came and said that we should give little kids a full freedom of choice. That they will be able to choose what they want to study now. And it might begin with PE lessons that might sound not as important as math lessons, but in the end it might go to the point where you will be able to choose whatever you want to do, and you will miss the whole idea of schools, as I'll show you in the second idea. In addition, they said that parents should have more responsibility, that parents should choose everything for their children because the children get the freedom of choice, and because in this way you agree with us that these kids are not that rational because they are controlled fully by they should be controlled fully by the parents. You basically said the government doesn't have to do much, the parents should do more. You put more responsibility on the parents. Now, this is problematic because of two reasons. Well, first of all, parents do not have all the information they need in order to provide their kids with full education on every subject, on every lesson, on everything. There is no doubt that parents should have control over their children's life, and they should have some control. And also, the point is that also the government should have some kind of control in this, because the government does have the expertise, does have the tools, does have the things, facilities to provide these kids with better lives. But in addition, as a government, when do we prevent this freedom of choice? We prevent this freedom of choice when people think irrationally. You can't say that these kids will be granted full freedom of choice because their parents will control them. You don't give these kids the freedom of choice. You're actually giving it to their parents. These kids are not rational. As we've showed you during all of our speeches, the kids at the age of 8 do not receive rational decisions. However, kids over the age of 18, people who already experience some things in their lives, people who studied many subjects during primary school, during high school, during many other places, people who know things more than 8 years old. Now, let's look at the goals of schools. Now, if we come from the point of primary school, so the goal of primary schools of kids until the age of 18, basically, the goal is to expose them to many subjects, to as much subjects as possible, so they will be able to do the right choice to where should they study, what should they study, what is best for them, so they will be able to make this right choice at the age of 18. These things are, primary school is a thing that should prepare them for their lives. This is the idea behind primary school, this is why it should expose them to these key lessons. You basically attack the idea of primary school by saying that parents know best for their children, that these children should have the option to choose whether they want or not. By attacking this, you actually attack kind of the idea of primary schools. Now, what's the difference between these primary schools and between universities is that in universities, you choose to come there. It's not that you are forced, you don't choose to come to this university cases. We showed you why specifically this is the government's job to force kids under the age of 18 to not choose, and over the age of 18 they should choose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask you all to clear out. Thank you very much. This was a debate that we thought got more and more interesting as it went on. Overall, we came to a unanimous decision. We thought what happened this round is that the proposition team, it was somewhat of a difficult wording of the resolution, and we felt that the proposition team certainly ran a fair case, but they were somewhat cut off guard by, we thought, the legitimate approach taken by the opposition. And we thought they did bring it back to quite a great extent, but not quite enough, so we gave the round to side opposition. And there were a couple of key issues, and obviously one of them was whether it's better for the government to have this level of control over parents. And we thought that, on balance, we thought we were more persuaded by the argument that the parents are the ones that should have this level of control. Although we were a little, I guess, concerned that we thought there was some level of case tension that if you're, I think you can certainly make a strong argument why, in this circumstance, the parents should have this level of control. But how can you also make a freedom of choice argument? Is the 8-year-old being given freedom of choice, or are you allowing the parents to make this decision? We thought that was a case tension that wasn't really brought up by the proposition side. But overall, I think that was the key issue. I'm sure my colleague will add something.
Yeah, I was really interested when we were told 3 topics. Oh, that PE one's going to be tricky because we don't know how we all will run it. Because it's quite clear that you guys need to say that after the age of 18, it starts to become optional, but we weren't sure the choice is the opposition's. Are you going to say, okay, we think it should instead be mandatory after the age of 18, or do you go, we want to have it optional before the age of 18? And we weren't quite sure how it was going to go, and I think that the way that you guys chose to do it made for an interesting debate, because what came out was, is it the parents or is it the government, like we said. What I found really interesting is the debate is very different between, are we talking about 8-year-olds, or are we talking about you guys who would also be affected by this? Like, would the parents would be deciding for you guys? Like, I don't know how keen you guys would be for having your parents decide on your behalf. Like, I know if my parents had told me you're doing PE, I would have not been cool with that, right? So I think that another realm that this debate could have been taken to is, okay, there's the arena of kids that we're talking about who really can't make decisions for themselves, who don't understand the benefit in it, but there are a group of kids who know themselves best. So I think maybe either you guys could have, I think what you ran was totally fine, but you also could have been we think that it should have been optional after the age of high school. Once you enter to this, however old you are, 13, 14, we say once you hit that age, it should be optional. Or you could have said, we think that it's not the choice of the children, and it's not the choice of the government, it's purely the choice of the parents. The letter goes home, what do you want your kids in, PE or not? Right? I think there's more ways to go with it, and I think you could have thought more about what are the actors involved in this debate, really. And I know that you guys are very thrown off by what you're expecting. And another thing that you need to consider is when an opposition comes out in the way that you don't expect, you could have altered your third argument to that, and it wouldn't have clashed, it wouldn't have knifed your first case, but make sure that your arguments and you listen very closely, oh, this is how the opposition is going about it, and this is the best way to go about our case. But overall, I think this is the good issues came out by the third speeches, you know what I mean? The thirds were right in picking what needed to be squashed out, but overall, I think we're really impressed. And we come to ask for personal comments after this thing, so well done. Congratulations. I think so. Hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to do it here? Do you want to go?
Do you want to talk together?
Yeah. We'll take that prof is playing by off the rules, which, and by that I meant that you guys
Just like playing more defense.
like you played defensive. You should have played offensive. So what they did is they picked a case that they were going to run, and they pushed you into this corner. And you guys didn't like the corner that they had pushed you into, but rather than being like, no, like we're gonna push right back and like really fight it, you kind of just, they gave you grounds to play on, and you're like, okay, we're gonna play within your restrictions. And by the end of the debate, by the third prof and the reply speech, you guys knew exactly what you had to prove. You had figured it out. You knew the stance you had to take, but because you weren't expecting what they were going to do, you guys looked a bit muddled at the beginning. And I think what you need to do in this kind of circumstance is, this is an instance of teamwork, where the more you are, the longer you've been together as a team, the easier this is, which is, you do your first proposition speech, you sit there and you listen to what the first opposition runs, and if it's contrary to what you expect, you immediately, as a team, construct what is our new burden going to be, what is our new line, and therefore how does this affect our case. And I think that if you would have done that, you would have seen, hey, maybe our third argument isn't as relevant anymore because now both sides are running choice. Did you see how that happened? You guys were saying, at 18 you should have choice, and they said at 8 you should have choice. And so they pushed you guys to no longer run choice arguments, but to run mandatory arguments. And so there was this need in the second speech to run, we think physical education has all of these benefits. Boom, 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 boom. Here's all the reasons why physical education is
And at the end, you were doing that. You were justifying why it's a really important subject. It's just as important as the others. It gives a life skill, all those kind of things. But that came out later in the round, whereas it didn't, we know why it wasn't in the first speech explicitly, but it certainly didn't contradict the first speech. You could certainly make the argument, so, we think physical education is really, really valuable, but when you're 18, you should be able to make the choice whether you want to do it or not. That's completely consistent with everything you argued. But because of the way they opted, I think you had to take the stance, we think physical education is incredibly important, and that's why it's mandatory. And start pushing that line right as early as you can.
Yeah.
Like to make it mandatory until the age of 18?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was your guys' new burden to prove that they shouldn't have the choice, and therefore the reason they shouldn't have the choice is because physical education is so important. You not only have to prove that they can't make the choice, you have to prove they can't make the choice because there's a right answer, and they won't necessarily come to that correct answer, and here's all the reasons why we think that doing it is the right answer, and there's no ground for negotiation here. Like, these kids need this physical education. Giving them the choice would be so detrimental.
And the same kind of arguments that, if you let people choose math, then the kids will complain to their parents, and the parents will finally agree and sign the form. They won't have to take math. But math is so important. We don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Physical education is the same. I'm going to complain to my dad. No, I don't want to do that. I get picked on. No, it's very important. You have to take it. Well, maybe he'll just give in and sign the form. This way you make me mandatory because it's so important for our society. And I like the arguments about, it's like ongoing health of the individual. It sort of goes beyond. Like, I'm a lawyer, so I don't really use math. That's fine, but I'm always going to need to be healthy. I'm always going to, I think you're starting to make those arguments, but again, it's sort of coming out too late.
Another rebuttal that you guys came out with, which was like a one-liner, which I think would have been huge, is peer pressure. Can you imagine what it would be like at 9 years old if everyone's like, no, PE isn't cool, like, don't do it. And it's like, even if the kid loves PE and they get the pressure to not do PE, suddenly, now the kid is making a choice that's going to affect the rest of their life based on how their peers tell them to choose courses. Like, at 9 years old, peer pressure is huge, right? Yeah. So maybe in high school or definitely in university, you can resist that peer pressure because you understand what's best for you. But peer pressure when you're that age, like, the decision as to whether or not to take PE is nothing to do with how much you enjoy it or how good it is for you. It's purely based on what your friends say, right? So I think that you guys could have been like, yeah, we agree that maybe in some cases parents know better than the government, but that's under the assumption that parents will be making this decision, right? They never said that it has to be the parents. They were running freedom of choice. They were saying give these kids the freedom of choice. So you guys could have nailed them on that. So. other than that, I think, like, I honestly believe that this is a round where you guys showed the potential. You guys showed that you understand the big issues of the round and you understand how to run a strong case. You got thrown by the op, and I think you guys haven't been in a situation like this before, where you have to make a new case on the fly, and that's really hard. And it's a scary. I'm a second speaker, and that's a scary moment to be in, where you're like, holy crap, we've prepped one case, and suddenly we have been opposed by something out of left field, and you have to deal with it, right? But it's still that.
And not that these fellows were perfect, but they were very good. They were very good, you know. So you were basically a good team, and they constructed a solid case, and they were running it quite nicely.
And you poked the right holes.
Yeah, yeah. So.
Yeah. Well done, guys. Okay.